we are the ones we're waiting for, right? So today I wanted to talk to you about this idea of being spiritually real. Has anybody been having a rough time lately? I was sharing with Tom McCullough as we were prepping for the service today that, I have a tremendous amount of energy. Yes, we all know that, right? And I paced myself like a marathon runner for the 60th anniversary, right? From Thanksgiving last year, I kind of paced myself to the 60th. And I thought, got to the 60th, and I thought, now I get to rest. I have not had a chance to rest. There's been a lot going on here, and I'm tired, right? I'm tired. Is it okay to be tired? Absolutely, right? I mean, anybody in here ever feel that? We're just like, So this vacation is coming at the perfect time. I'm very excited about it. But I wanted to talk about how we hold those kinds of places with ourselves. How do we actually be spiritually real? Spiritually real. And, our vision statement. There we go. Thank you. A world spiritually awakened and transformed through realizing our divine potential. And I got to say, right now when I look at that, I just want to go take a nap. Right? I'm just like, just let me go lay down and close my eyes for a moment. And so I've been sitting with, what does that really mean? Realizing our divine potential, spiritually awakened. I mean, they're beautiful words, aren't they? They really are. I don't know why my Gujar doesn't seem to be working. Okay, you got me. So when we think about what awakening means, so the classic definition through most of the spiritual teachings is along the lines of to see through the illusion of a separate self to attain enlightenment. Now, in Unity, we're not so much focused on this idea of enlightenment. What we would call that space is the I am, the Christ consciousness. And the difference for me is that when I think about the Buddhist understanding of enlightenment, and it's not fair to the Buddhists, and I admit that, but what comes to my mind is somebody sitting on their cushion, beautifully poised. And when I think about Jesus and I think about his ministry, I think about somebody who is in the world, actively in the world, bringing the I am consciousness into day-to-day, every moment activities. Now, Buddhism does that too. So if you're watching and people are like, wait a minute, I know it does that too. There is something about Jesus' ministry, though. Can you feel the difference? He shows up at a wedding. And they're like, oh no, we don't have enough wine. And he's like, I'll take care of that for you. He was in the world, right? He was actually in the world. And so in Unity, what we would certainly say is that at the root of all suffering is separation. That any time we feel like we're suffering, it is because of a sense of separation. My sense of tiredness, can you see how that's a sense of separation? Somehow I personally have to manifest the energy to move forward rather than my being able to stay connected and rooted to infinite source, infinite supply. And when I do that, my tiredness falls away. And it really actually does. But it's hard to remember when you're literally, physically tired. Anybody in here get overwhelmed by their senses? That the sense, the body, it becomes so much that it becomes so hard to focus on something that feels as ethereal and effervescent as a state of consciousness. And oftentimes when we are in spiritual traditions, the kinds of language we use around dissolving this sense of separation is that we have to dissolve the ego. We have to eradicate the ego. We have to annihilate the ego. We have to destroy the ego. Is this familiar to everyone? I mean, in all the teachings, there's this theme, and it's really has shifted in the last 15, 20 years or so. There's been a real movement towards not making our ego the enemy. Right? And transpersonal psychology has played a big role in that transformation. And because unity is so linked into what's happening now in the world and what we understand, unity is absorbing the understandings of transpersonal psychology. That the ego is not the enemy. The ego is something that is part of who and what we are in time and in space. So rather than thinking we have to dissolve it or eradicate it or annihilate, right? We have this seeming polarity between our ego self and this awakened self. And I guess my big question would be, is that polarity actually real? I know we feel it. I know I'm aware of it within myself, that tension between how like my body overwhelms me, and that's my ego self, time and space, versus when we do that opening prayer, and honestly, in that prayer space, I feel like I could stay awake for 25 years. I do. I feel so resourced in that moment. So it feels like a polarity, but what if it actually isn't? So one of the ways that I would invite us, instead of annihilating and destroying and eradicating and all of that, what if this is a gentle process? What if this is about compassion? What if this is a process of revelation? Not a moment of it, but an actual process that we are engaging in. That is what we are here to be and do, is a process of revelation. And that's hard because it means we're never done. But right now, being part of a process of revelation, I'll tell you, when you're tired, it feels so good, doesn't it? I don't have to feel bad about where I am. I don't have to beat myself up for where I am. I don't have to say, oh, you're not being very ministerial right now. You're not being an inspirational leader by modeling what it means. Can you hear the voices in my head? And for the most part, I think I do a good job of being really honest with all of you about where I am. And I still have those voices in my head, right? I still have them in my head. So what if I can bring compassion there? What if I can be more gentle with myself? What if you could be more gentle with yourself? What a concept, right? I'll just say next slide. So I guess where I'm sitting with all of this right now, and I don't have any answers, right? You can tell I'm in the middle of it, right? What if our ego is actually not separate? I mean, we say we believe in oneness. We say there's only one power and one presence. We say nothing is separate, and yet we somehow think our ego is separate. Our ego needs to be harnessed or changed, or right? What if our ego is actually not separate? What if that wholeness of ourself, that understanding that we have of ourself as a personality in this body temple, is actually part of our gift, part of what we're actually here to be? So it's not about eradication, but what if it's about integration? What if we are being invited to bring ourselves into a new understanding of wholeness that isn't about my ego self and isn't about my spiritual self, but is about the fact that I am a divine human, and being able to own those polarities in a way that allows us to literally be able to turn water into wine. That's what's on the other side of this. If we can shift our consciousness away from either or to yes and, I always say that unity is additive and inclusive. So if that's actually true, which I believe it is, then my egoic self got me in the door to begin with. So I don't want to eradicate it. Additive and inclusive. What if I'm larger than just my thoughts about my ego self, but my ego self is like essential to how I'm being called to show up in time and in space with my own unique gifts, with my own unique talents. Next slide, please. So I've been thinking about this idea of mindsets, and a lot of stuff goes on in my brain at all times. But I was thinking about, what does it mean to have a spiritually real mindset? What would that mean? And by mindset, the traditional definition for mindset now is this: it's a collection of beliefs. And does that not sound like what we hold in Unity? We have a collection of beliefs that we stand in. And so what if our spiritually real mindset was based on faith and optimism? And can you feel how I'm addressing both aspects? My egoic self, it can understand optimism. And my spiritual self, which absolutely is sourced and renewed by faith, what if my mindset is about faith and optimism? That I can use both of those things to propel me forward in my life and to the greater purpose, being in service to this world, making this world a different place. And if I'm not being real about what's actually in the world, how can I change it? And, next slide, please. This is often what the world tells us is real, that pessimism equals worldliness, and skepticism is perceptiveness, and fatalism is realistic, and that mistrust is being shrewd, and wariness is being astute, and catastrophizing is being prepared. This is what the world tells us. Can we understand how hard it is to stand in that faith and optimism when this is what the world is telling us? Oh, everyone just breathe with me. I saw Al just take a big breath. I'm like, yep. And I want to talk about catastrophizing, because I really think like this, we are doing that in our world over and over and over again. So catastrophizing is the tendency to assume the worst will happen when imagining a future situation, even if you have evidence that this is not the most likely outcome. Right? And they go on to say that if you are intolerant of uncertainty, you are more likely to catastrophize. Now, we do this in little ways, and we do this in big ways. So Chris and I went to the game yesterday, which we love going to the game, and we have a lot of fun there. And we went to one of the food trucks to get some food, because they've got food trucks there available for food, not just the stuff that's in the stadium. And we get up there, we order some food. Chris pays for it. Chris says, "Do I get a receipt? Do I have a number?" And she said, "Oh, well, what's your name?" And Chris said, "Chris." And she said, "No, we'll call your number. We'll call your name." And we're like, "Okay," and we walk away. And we're waiting there, and I said, "I think I also want to get something else." So I walked away, and I went to check out another food truck, and she starts texting me. They might have called my name, but I think somebody else might have taken our food. Because I think they said Chris, but then somebody else stepped up. "What if they got our food?" And I said, "Well, just breathe." They know we ordered food. We'll be able to get our food. And she's like, "But I don't have a receipt. So how am I going to prove that I had my food? What if we don't get our food?" Can you feel what was starting to happen? Yeah. And some of this has to do with my wife being French, and like our culture is completely alien to her on some level, right? In France, you would never do that. because somebody would come up and steal your food, right? So it's a different culture. But she was catastrophizing for something as simple as getting a steak shawarma. We do it all the time, is my point. I'm not trying to point out her as being something that the rest of us don't do. How many people in here can recognize that you take something very small and you turn it into something that is just going to be a major catastrophe at the end of it all? Right? We do it all the time. Now, this is a mindset, and we can change our mindset. And mindset is different than behavior. So to change your behavior would be to notice that you're catastrophizing and say, well, I'm not going to text anybody about it. I'm just going to sit with it, and I'm going to breathe. And you're using behavior to try to meet the catastrophizing. How many people in here have done that? What mindset is inviting us into is that we don't even catastrophize. We don't go down that road. Now, what creates the capacity for us to be able to have a different mindset? Because remember, we're living in a world that's all about pessimism and everything else. Next slide, please. It really comes down to, what do we believe is real? What do we believe is real? Now, some of what we believe is real is based on our personal experience. If we have had our food stolen on a regular basis from a food truck, then the catastrophizing that the food's going to get stolen, is that really catastrophizing? Maybe, maybe not, right? Can you feel that? So what we're being invited into is to shift our understanding of what is real. What if what is real is not what we can touch? I know that's hard to kind of get, because I can touch this. I think it's real because the molecules in this chair are moving so slowly that I can actually grab onto them. I think it makes it real. I think it's more real than the consciousness that I cultivate when I'm sitting and meditating, the consciousness that arises when we're singing together, the consciousness that arises when we step into the prayer field. It's not true, it's an illusion. It's an illusion. This chair is no more real than the consciousness that you are dancing with at all times. Next slide, please. So what I want to invite us into is what I'm calling spiritual optimism. It's an awareness of oneness. That's where we start, right? Is that we start from awareness of oneness. We're grounded in possibility and limitless potential. Now, this is where the catastrophizers kind of go sideways, because they are very grounded in possibility and limitless potential, but it's always to our detriment. Can you feel that? Know that things don't always go our way. When we are spiritually optimistic, we're not saying that everything's going to work out the way we exactly want it to work out. Sorry. If you came here thinking that you were going to get a teaching that meant that your life was going to be smooth sailing here on out, you are not in the right place. We are aware that things will go sideways. A spiritual optimist brings compassion to that illusion of separation. So that place within you that feels lost and alone and overwhelmed and not enough and tired and whatever the narrative is, can you bring compassion to yourself? Can you really just hold yourself? You don't need to solve anything. Just be compassionate with where you actually are. Chooses to see obstacles as opportunities. So this is where I know I am an optimist, right? So when she said somebody might steal our food, and I thought, oh, good, maybe we can order something else. right? I mean, that's where I went, right? Maybe we can try something else then. Maybe that steak shawarma, that's like the universe telling us, no, 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 don't eat that. This is also the big one. Trust inner resources. And this is often why we catastrophize, because we do not trust that we have the capacity to meet and navigate anything that arises. Breathe into that with me. If someone had stolen our shawarma, we had the inner resources to navigate it, right? But we don't trust that we have those inner resources. We doubt them. We doubt that we're going to be able to speak up. We doubt that we're going to be able to be articulate enough. We doubt that we're going to be believed. We doubt a bazillion of things. And again, some of that is rooted in life experience. And what a spiritual optimist is always saying is that, yes, that is what was, but as Ernest Holmes would say, my past is not my precedent. Just because that was what was, that is not a precedent anymore for what is. And the Supreme Court has followed that thinking, haven't they, lately? So we can trust our inner resources, right? That what happened before, we can pivot, we can shift, we can move, and that creates flexibility and flow, and that we're open to new ideas. Like, okay, well, what else is on the menu? Okay, even if they didn't believe us, we have the resources to buy something else. I can trust that I have the capacity to navigate whatever is happening. Now, with my clients, I will often play a game called Worst Case Scenario, which is basically, let's catastrophize. Let's come up with the worst case scenario. And then I say to them, so what would you do? What would you do? Instead of just sitting in the anxiety of, that will happen, that will happen, that will happen, I say, what would you do? Worst case scenario happens. What do you do? And they all take a deep breath and go, oh, well, I guess, I would do X, Y, Z. Because we're built to be able to navigate whatever is arising for us. Can you feel the truth of that? So can we let go of this idea that we need to appear worldly, that we need to appear sophisticated, that we need to appear intelligent, right? One of the other ones, I actually woke up in the middle of the night, because that happens to me often too when I'm preparing a talk. Along with that, wariness being we're astute, perfection equals excellence. That's another false equivalent. Can you feel that? And we get sucked into these narratives, and all they do is hamstring us. They're not spiritually real. They're not. We're not navigating what is from a place of acknowledgement. Wow, this is really hard right now. And, not but, and I have the inner resources that I need, even if I don't know it right now. I know that those inner resources are going to reveal themselves because I am limitless potential, because I am so much more than I think I am. How many people in here have had something catastrophic happen to them, and on the other side of it, you came out of it going, wow, look at what I did. I didn't know I had that in me. How many people have had something like that happen to them? Everybody's hand should be up, because I know you've all navigated something rough, and at the other end of it, you were like, wow, I did that. I got on the other side of that. I learned something. I know something about myself. I can trust something about myself. Next slide, please. So this idea of spiritual optimism is really crucial for the lifeblood of this community. Can you feel that? Can you feel how if we are bringing spiritual optimism, really being present to what is, and understanding that we have everything we need and more, that is how we are able to be productive and transform and move through the world. And we have a fabulous board leadership that has said yes to standing in that very, very challenging place within leadership of this community. That they are willing to stand on the principles that we believe in and navigate what is. And that requires this level of spiritual optimism. So I'm going to invite the board to come up here now because we're going to install our board for 2024. So I know not everybody is here, but those who are here, please come on up here. Monica's going to come right over here so we can catch her in the camera. Lynn is on a much-deserved camping trip, right? Yeah, so I think it's actually only Lynn. I need my, Tom, can you grab me my iPad on the, thank you. Yeah, you can, I don't need the remote, clearly. So to serve, to really serve is the highest expression of commitment and love. And to be asked to lead, that is the highest honor. So this morning, the Board of Trustees for Unity in Marin, that you have chosen to lead in the coming year, they stand before you. And the relationship between the community and the board is one of deep respect and mutual regard. You, as a community, have asked them to take on the holy work of leadership, discernment, and guidance. And they need your support to do this work. They need you to share your insights and ideas. They need you to offer them your trust as they fulfill their office faithfully. So the work of this spiritual community is the work of the whole community. It's the work of building a world of which we all dream, a world that will work for everyone. And for these individuals, it may mean time spent poring over budget sheets or hours spent in meetings where the smallest details are being hashed out. It may manifest in laughter or frustration, but it's always sacred, for it's in pursuit of authentic and empowered community. So to the board, I'd like to say, in accepting the call to serve, each of you has said yes to leadership, to spiritual optimism, and loving service. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you agree, please answer, I do. Do you promise to share your gifts and talents with humility and vulnerability in service to Unity in Marin? Do you commit to being open and receptive to the needs of the community? Do you promise to support the growth and ever-expanding vision of this spiritual community and leadership? Do you commit to support Unity in Marin's mission to be a loving community dedicated to spiritual growth, inclusivity, and service as we care for ourselves, each other, and the natural world? And do you promise to be faithful to Unity's truth principles and to be a space for the fulfillment of Unity's core values, connectivity, inclusivity, and authenticity? Through your willingness to serve the spiritual community with love, faith, and joy, you are hereby installed as Unity in Marin's Board of Trustees.